A few years back, when I was planning the original Edenicity podcast, I came across a book that had been written 18 years prior called Carfree Cities. It was so detailed and so well thought out that I thought I would share it with you today and discuss why the book came to be, what it proposed, in other words, how cities should be car-free according to this book, and then present basically the Edenized version, which I prepared before the original Edenicity design in 2020. Welcome to Edenicity. Best Practices for Sustainably Abundant Cities. The book makes an impassioned case that cities should be built car-free. Of course, historically, they all were car-free prior to the mid-1920s. The author, James Crawford, points out that cars make cities antisocial, noisy, dangerous, polluting, wasteful of land, and wasteful of resources. He quotes a study that showed that as automobile traffic on the street increases, social life on that street dies. The noise, danger, and pollution slowly drive people off the street. Driven from the street, chance meetings between neighbors rarely occur, and they are more likely to remain strangers. The lack of contact does grave danger to the social fabric of the neighborhood. Sound familiar? Most modern American suburbs that I've been to were surprisingly anonymous. He catalogs the real costs of cars and the hidden subsidies of cars, and then formulates a fairly lengthy list of design goals to finally arrive at what he called his reference design. This was a city of 1 million people with 81 circular inhabited districts, 18 utility areas, that was 12 kilometers or 7.5 miles across. Even though it was a very compact place, it was 80% green space. Linking the city together were 3 rail loops, and I'll have much clearer views of the rail loops in a moment. Each of the districts was about 600 meters wide, which is about a 10-minute walk across from one end to the other. These would house 6,000 people on each side. Now, he actually pointed out that 6,000 is a really nice unit for a village. Sociologists have known this for a long time, and it just is a really cohesive village size. Just to give you a sense of it, 6,000 residents is about enough to support 2 to 3 classes per grade in a grade school within that village. Now, let's see what we're looking at here. The black areas are buildings. The dark gray areas through the middle are freight rail. The light gray is pavement. I'll have a lot more to say about that in a moment. The blank page area are basically courtyards and green space. Basically, he's got freight and metro rail separating the 2 neighborhoods from each other. When I look at this, I see a problem. That central corridor doesn't necessarily belong to one neighborhood or the other. If you're going to chunk a city into villages of 6,000 people, which is a really good idea, the exact wrong way to do it is to pair them in this way, because you're going to create polarity and strife in managing the common areas between them. It's basically a 2-party system built into the architecture. Here's what that looks like. This is from the Carfree.com website. I put a link in the description. And you can see that central corridor is a little bit more built up than the rest of it. Here's another view of it. So you can see there's large courtyards, ample space, narrow avenues between the buildings. Actually, these avenues are pretty wide, and we'll get to that in a moment. So it looks very livable, except for that built-in polarization that I mentioned. And by the way, he also thought that elevators were by themselves antisocial. Now, having grown up in high-rises, my experience was quite different. I found that over time you got to know people in your building. But in Crawford's view, elevators actually damage the social fabric, his words not mine, because they tend to make people more awkward with one another. Well, that's pretty vague. There's a moment of awkwardness, but I found living in high-rises that as long as there's social events that are organized within the building, you start to recognize people who are on more or less the same schedules as you in the elevator and have something to talk about as long as there's some good programming within the building. I've found that elevators in a residential situation are not all that bad. Crawford also compares apartments to single-family homes, showing that by and large they're just much more expensive, much more power-hungry, much more wasteful of materials and utilities than detached homes. Let's talk about how the metros work. In Crawford's design, every house is within 5 minutes walk to the metro station. There's 3 central transfer districts. So if you zoom in the very center of this diagram, here are the 3 transfer districts. And with a top speed of just 100 kilometers per hour, every house in the city is no more than 35 minutes from every other house door to door, which is pretty good. Crawford also suggested that because the city is built around its transit system, it should make that transit system free, so you don't have any friction boarding or accessing transportation services. And I think it's a pretty good argument. The costs of such a system would be 10 to 20 times less than car ownership. Now, how would this look in the real world? Here's one of Crawford's Carfree Cities overlain over Amsterdam with a slightly smaller population, 700,000 people. And in actual practice, it might look something like like this, where it uses the existing metro lines to accommodate car-free districts that are built in a transit-oriented development style over the stations. And over time, the areas that are not within those districts would gradually succeed to green space. Now, what if you wanted to take a city like this and grow it past 1 million? I mean, some cities do that. There were a few options. One was daisy chain several cities together with a large loop metro. And while under construction, as you can see on the right, the districts don't have to touch. And basically the travel times are still pretty good. It's a really fun book, really detailed. He's got tons of pictures of car-free cities such as Venice, Italy, and I've put a link in the description. Now, speaking of books, a few years ago, I wrote a book called Win the Test. This is for students of science, technology, engineering, math, and other quantitative disciplines who would like to do better on their exams. This is the exact same system that I used to go from failing a midterm to walking out of a 3-hour final in 40 minutes with a 98%. And yes, I've taught other people very successfully how to implement this system. Now, I have no desire to be a test-taking coach. So what I've done is put my entire system, leaving nothing out, into a $10 book, which is available at winthetest.com. So if you know anybody in the sciences, engineering, math, or any quantitative field who could use a boost, please pass along this link. Okay, we were talking about car-free cities and how to Edenize them. I like a big city, and I didn't like the districts in Crawford's design. I also wanted to add on-site food and energy production and make the districts themselves much more self-sufficient to reduce the demand on the transportation system. For my inspiration, I drew on the new towns that have become popular in Singapore and Hong Kong and numerous other cities. When you reach a population of 120,000 people, it's possible to design a city so that you can meet most of your daily needs within the district itself. An Edenicity designed along the lines of Carfree Cities would have 36 new towns of 120,000 people, 9 central districts, again with 120,000 people, so just over 1 million people in the city center, as well as 6 industrial areas. Now, for some reason, Crawford didn't dare make the streets as narrow as some of the most successful car-free areas in older cities. I don't know why he shied away from that, but in Edenicity, in all the designs, the footpaths are much narrower than in car-free cities. Here's what that looked like. In the reference design inspired by Carfree Cities, you have a district that has 20 villages of about 6,000 people, and now the governance is a lot more straightforward. No single village owns the right-of-way through the district, nor the built-up area around that right-of-way. This is managed collaboratively in a council of villages. Politically, this is a much more stable situation to manage. The bikeways are covered with photovoltaics and go around the periphery of the village as well as down the middle. And then the gray areas are the much narrower footpaths. So for most people, most of their daily errands can be run within the village without crossing a bike path. And this also makes it possible then to route the bike paths in little dips under the pedestrian crossings, capitalizing on the fact that bikes really efficiently store energy. It did use Hyperloop because at the time it seemed like the technology was further along than we now know it is. And I have stuck with the distribution of townhouses around the block from this design in the current design. But the question is, how would such a city grow? Well, here's the wrong way to do it. If we build all of the rail lines all at once and then start filling it in with entire districts one at a time, then we end up with large areas like you see on the top where people would have to go along a loop of rail and it would be a waste of their time. So this is the wrong way to do it. What's the right way? Build the city out one loop at a time and then build the districts out from cores like little lumps of sugar in a string. But even so, I thought this geometry was not flexible enough and wouldn't accommodate itself to existing cities that well. But in the end, I had the consideration of dealing with natural drainage, and this is where I had to part company entirely from this geometry. So in the original car-free design, the districts are round. I know a lot of fans of this channel have been asking for round cities. The problem with round, or gridded for that matter, is that it does not follow the natural contour of the land. In a landscape that's flat or sloping in just one direction, the lines of constant contour run parallel. The creek beds running basically downhill would run at 90 degrees to those lines. And so you get a natural gridded structure that then follows the topography. So what I mean is that these lines on a real landscape would become very wrinkly and distorted and rounded. So the grid would follow the natural land contours to buffer floods and droughts. If we're going to design ecologically sound car-free cities, then this is the topology that they need to obey, where we put in tree belts along lines of contour and lines that are perpendicular to contour. Anyway, I had a lot of fun going through this book. and starting the Edenicity journey with it. And I'm glad I got a chance to share this with you. Thanks once again to the patrons who have been making this channel possible. Paid members get to see each episode a week early, ad-free, and you can learn all about that from the links in the description and the pinned comment. Thanks for watching. Take care, stay green, see you next time.